Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we take a look at why Khalistan as a concept should be of significant interest to the West, both economically and strategically. And as the day of Bandi Chhor Divas passes, we take a look at what is so important about this annual event, honouring the so-called Liberation Day, and why it remains just as relevant today for the Sikh community, both in the diaspora and in Punjab. And talking of Punjab, we sadly reveal yet more evidence of India's divisive BJP policies as Hindus viciously attack a Punjabi Sikh in Punjab in broad daylight, as Delhi's deliberate influx of Hindus into the state is blamed. Well, all this and more on today's show, but joining me as always is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. And good morning to our viewers out there. Just a quick announcement that, of course, we know next month there will be the Khalistan referendum stop in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. They are looking for some volunteers. So if you are in that region and have interest in seeing what volunteer opportunities are available to help out as part of the committee there, or just a part of crowd control, clean up, whatever it is, you can call area code 437-452-3608. And they would love to hear from you. They're, again, looking for volunteers there for the Khalistan referendum vote in Ottawa, Ontario. I know that Angus and I will both be bringing you stories about that, as we know there are rallies coming up, all kinds of exciting events that we'll keep you tuned to. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to stick around to the end of the show tonight and see what comments made the grade. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed, and don't forget to take your flag if you volunteer. So good luck to the team in Ottawa. But yes, today, James and I will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as James mentioned, we will take a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show. So do stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Something a little different. Usually when we're talking about Khalistan, we're talking about the benefit for the Sikh community and maybe for the South Asian community there in between Pakistan and India as a buffer zone. Something that we don't spend a great deal of time on is speaking about how it could be a huge economic and strategic benefit for the Western world. I thought today we would take a look at how this could hypothetically be a major win for the Western world when it comes to geopolitics, trade, economic benefits, and so much more within that region. Now, of course, on the screen here, you can see a little image that's just kind of a mock-up of NATO, and, looking at the maps, you got some highlighted nations, including a Khalistan, and again here. So we look at that as, there could be strategic benefits in many different areas, including world peace and security. We know that this is a major issue, and of course, we know that Khalistan could be the solution. So let's first take a look at reimagining the map of South Asia, and that is a diaspora-driven phenomenon, and that is how it is described, because it is a very powerful movement that some, including Modi, would have you believe is a fringe movement. But believe it or not, it is much more. Now, in the 21st century, of course, the Khalistan movement has largely faded until recent when it made a reappearance. But has it really? I think that what has been missed is that it has been in the hearts and the minds of the Sikh people, but we didn't hear about it for a few years as it was kind of in a lull period. But again, the action towards bringing it to a realization has become more significant. Now, of course, they're finding that vocal support not only among certain segments of the Sikh diaspora in Western nations, including Canada, the UK, the US, Australia, but outside of that diaspora as well, which, as I said, is very, very important. Now, the transnational activism is fueled by the narrative of historical grievances centered on two pivotal events. Of 1984, of course, we know of Operation Blue Star, and that was the India military's assault on the Golden Temple, which resulted in significant damage to Sikhism's holiest shrine and numerous civilian casualties, many more than the India government would have us believe. Now, there was also the subsequent anti-Sikh pogroms that followed the assassination of Prime Minister Gandhi, and not Modi yet. So don't mistake that. The assassination of Indira Gandhi, which Over 3,000 Sikhs were killed in New Delhi, and then there were all of the other regions. So when you look at it, you're talking tens of thousands, if not more. Now, these events created a deep sense of alienation and trauma that has been passed down through generations within the diaspora worldwide. It solidified support for the idea of a separate homeland as the only guarantee of security and dignity. Now, of course, we know that the diaspora-based activism creates significant and escalating diplomatic friction between the Western governments and India. Here, the Western nations are committed to principles of free speech, often permitting protests and non-binding referendums, as the one coming up in Ottawa. And it's organized by pro-Khalistan groups. India, in turn, accuses these countries of providing safe havens for extremists and terrorists who threaten its national security, a story that we are very familiar with hearing through the echo chamber of India media. Now, this dynamic has placed Western governments in a difficult position, caught between their democratic values and their strategic partnerships with a rising India. This, of course, is looking at all of the democratic values and the partnerships, but we'll also explore the paradoxical argument that the very creation of an independent Khalistan could potentially resolve this persistent and damaging diplomatic dilemma. It could be the solution all the way across the board, and that should be exciting to many throughout the world. Now, while fraught with immense and almost certain peril, the hypothetical emergence of a stable, peaceful, and independent Khalistan could, under a set of highly specific conditions, offer the Western world a unique portfolio of geopolitical, economic, and diplomatic benefits. And when I say that, they need to make sure that there are conditions that limit the input and influence from those nations that they're working with. Now, these political advantages would include the creation of strategic buffer zone that we've talked a lot about on this program in a volatile region. Also, the rise of a new democratic and economic partner aligned with Western interests, and the definitive resolution of the diaspora dilemma that currently strains relations with India. So again, there wouldn't be that strife going on between India and other governments as it relates to this situation or this topic. Now, of course, we've talked in great lengths about that new buffer state and the realigned Asia. The emergence of a sovereign Khalistan would represent a fundamental redrawing of the strategic map of South Asia. For Western powers whose interests in the region are primarily focused on stability, counterterrorism, and balancing the rise of China, the creation of a new state in such a critical location could offer a very distinct geopolitical advantage. This section that we're going to talk about next, before we jump forward, we'll talk about how an independent Khalistan could function as that strategic buffer, realign the dynamic power or the power dynamics there, and create new opportunities for Western influence in managing long-standing conflicts. And believe me, this is of importance to the world peace. The Punjab region is the geographic and strategic heart of the decades-long nuclear armed rivalry between India and Pakistan. It's heavily militarized, and it's a borderland that has been theater for multiple wars and remains a potential flashpoint of immense global concern. The introduction of a new sovereign entity between these two historical antagonists would fundamentally change this dynamic. An independent Khalistan, assuming it could establish and maintain its sovereignty, would create a physical and political buffer separating the two main conventional military forces of India and Pakistan. The new geopolitical reality would compel both New Delhi and Islamabad to completely recalibrate their military postures and strategic doctrines. For decades now, their planning has been just predicated on direct contiguous borders. The existence of a third state would disrupt these plans, potentially increasing warning times, as well as reducing the likelihood of a surprise conventional attack escalating into a wider conflict. Now, from a Western perspective, focused on de-escalation and crisis management, a neutral or pro-Western Khalistan could serve as a valuable strategic fulcrum. The new state could, for instance, host international monitoring missions or confidence-building centers under the aegis of United Nations or other multilateral bodies. We have seen what that could look like, and in many of the stories that we talked about, how this could work. Now, it would provide the international community, and by extension, Western powers, with a direct and legitimate physical presence on the ground to mediate tensions. A position that is currently untenable given the sovereignty concerns of both India and Pakistan. By breaking the bipolar standoff, a sovereign Khalistan would introduce a new element that favors multilateral diplomacy and conflict management, aligning with long-term Western objectives for regional stability. Another win, I would say. And as we look at it, of course, you have to look at counterbalancing China's regional influence. A primary strategic objective for the United States and its allies is the containment of China's expanding influence, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. Pakistan is the cornerstone of China's South Asian strategy, serving as a critical all-weather ally and the host of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. A flagship project of Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative is what CPEC is, essentially. And the deepening Sino-Pakistan strategic partnership is viewed as Western capitals, or by Western capitals, as a significant challenge to the regional balance of power. Now, the emergence of an independent Khalistan carved out of a region of immense strategic importance to both India and Pakistan would introduce a powerful new variable into China's regional calculus. The security and the stability of CPEC, which runs through parts of Pakistan that would be adjacent to or even potentially claimed by a new Sikh state, would be complicated. Beijing could no longer rely on a stable and predictable environment in its key partner state. Now, more significantly, if this new state were to align with the West, it would represent a major strategic gain, such as an alignment is a plausible outcome, given that the modern Khalistan movement is overwhelmingly a phenomenon of the Western Sikh diaspora, where political and cultural orientation is shaped by life in Western democracies. A pro-Western Khalistan could become a new partner for the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, also known as Quad, providing a friendly state on the periphery of China's sphere of influence. Huge win. It could potentially serve as a location for intelligence sharing, monitoring operations, and diplomatic engagement aimed at counterbalancing Chinese operations in that region. That would directly serve the core Western geopolitical goal of building a network of like-minded partners to manage China's rise. Now, this scenario reveals a deeper strategic possibility. The creation of Khalistan could function as a geopolitical poison pill for the China-Pakistan alliance. Pakistan's historical support of the Khalistan movement was never intended to create a strong, viable, and independent neighbor. It was a tool of asymmetric warfare designed to bleed and weaken India. Let's not fool ourselves. A truly independent Khalistan, especially one that entertains the greater Khalistan narrative encompassing historical Sikh territories in Pakistan, in Pakistani Punjab as well, including major cities like Lahore, would instantly transform from a Pakistani asset into a significant national security threat for Islamabad. This would compel Pakistan to divert substantial military and strategic resources to its new western border, away from a singular focus on India. The forced strategic reorientation would inherently diminish Pakistan's value to China as a dedicated anti-India proxy. For the West, this represents a potential fracturing of key strategic partnerships of its primary global competitor, achieved not through direct confrontation, but through a fundamental shift in the regional architecture. Now, in terms of how this would reshape as well the dynamics of the Kashmir conflict, there would be direct impact there as well, because the proposed territory for Khalistan in most formulations shares a border with the heavily disputed region of Jammu and Kashmir. The Kashmir conflict remains one of the world's most intractable and dangerous disputes, another potential nuclear flashpoint that has defied resolution for over 75 years. The emergence of a sovereign Khalistan would radically alter the geography and political dynamics of this conflict. Most notably, it would serve the primary direct land corridor, sever the direct land corridor between the main territory of India and the Kashmir Valley. This would prevent a significant logistical and military challenge for India in maintaining its control over that region. While this would be a major blow to New Delhi from a Western perspective, focused on breaking geopolitical stalemates, the disruption could cause or create new pathways for conflict resolution. The long-standing bilateral deadlock between India and Pakistan could be broken by the introduction of a new sovereign actor on the border. The new state could alter the negotiating dynamics, potentially opening doors for international mediation or new settlement framework that has been impossible to achieve under the current geographic and political environment and configuration. Pakistan's intelligence services have historically sought to link the Khalistan movement with its own proxy war in Kashmir, viewing them as two fronts in a single campaign to destabilize India. The actualization of an independent Khalistan would force a complete and painful reevaluation of this strategy in Islamabad. The new state would have its own interests, which may not align with Pakistan's objectives in Kashmir. The deoccupying of the two conflicts could simplify the geopolitical landscape, allowing a more focused diplomatic effort on resolving the Kashmir issue on its own terms. This shift from a bipolar security architecture to a more complex multilateral one would inherently create more space for Western powers to act as influential mediators and balancers. The current paradigm where Western influence is often limited to this crisis response. It could evolve into one where the West plays a more direct and legitimized role in shaping the regional security framework, facilitating the next need of or facilitated by the need of new smaller state for external security guarantees. Again, it is bringing solutions to the region and to the world. Now, as we move on here, we'll take a quick peek at the next section here, but we will continue with part 2 of this on Monday because we have a lot of information that we could cover here, and to give it the attention it deserves, I think we'll break it into 2 parts here. Now, beyond the cold calculus of geopolitics, the formation of the independent Khalistan could, under ideal circumstances, create a new partner for the West that is aligned not only in interests, but also in values and economic orientation, influenced heavily by its large, well-integrated, and politically active diaspora in the West. A sovereign Khalistan could emerge as a democratic anchor in a complex region, and of course, open up new market for Western trade and investment. And that is where there is a major anchor for that complex region, is because of the trade that is not only in agriculture or products, but also as a service industry, which would be estimated at about 50% of their GDP. Now, this is major because at this time, their GDP is actually quite small in representation of the service industry in compared to other nations that would be of same size and structure. So therefore, that allows a massive opportunity for their service industry to expand into the global markets, not to be too much of a threat to other nations, but instead complement them and bring it on. Now, as I close up here, I'm just going to give you a couple of quick numbers here. And for this, you could look at it for the Indian Punjab as it is now. The GSDP is nominal at about $110 billion. That's 25-26 budget year estimate. Now, the implications for an independent Khalistan would be a significant economic base comparable to many small to medium-sized nations. When you look at the growth rate, it's at about 6% in the 24-25 year, lagging India's overall 6.4% average. But underperformance suggests potential for accelerated growth under a new policy regime. And you've got to remember that India is not backing the best interests of Punjab and of any part of what would become Khalistan. So again, the opportunity is massive. When you look at the per capita GSDP, and that you're looking at about $2,900, and that's quite nominal for the 24-25 estimates. There's, again, room for significant growth to match the levels of other dynamic Asian economies. Sectoral breakdown. When I was talking about services, you're looking at about 50% of the GDP, and 25% in agriculture, the other 25% in industry, and that's a rough breakdown, but relatively balanced with a strong services sector to build upon. Agriculture strength, well, it's a major producer of India's wheat at about 17% and rice at about 12%. Now, that lays a great foundation to become a global food powerhouse with investment in agri-tech and other technology that's driving the agriculture industry. The key industries, besides that, you're also looking at textiles, steel, other food processing, and auto components, and existing industrial base can be modernized and expanded for the export markets. In terms of the FDI inflow, and that's the foreign development investment, you're looking at about $1 billion between October 2019 and June 2023, ranking 12th in India. Now, of course, this indicates massive untapped potential for more investor-friendly state. Big, huge benefit, especially with the diaspora throughout the world. They've already got a built-in network. Now, in terms of the literacy rate, in India, you're looking at official reports, which I think are exaggerated some, but the literacy rate is estimated to be at about 83.4% in 2024. I think that that may be a little high of a number that they put out, but again, a literate population capable of adapting to more modern skills-based economies is nothing but a benefit. And I do believe that through the commitment of Sikhs to the importance of education, community, and of course, building up each other on an equal level, not basing education on any type of caste system, I think that when you look at that, I believe that the literacy rates and the overall education success in Khalistan will be a massive benefit for their place in the world, Angus. And we'll continue on that on Monday because, as I said, there's a lot of information that I've drummed together to look at this hypothetical.
Indeed, and yes, we've often analysed the benefits of the establishment of Khalistan, and they are numerous. And in fact, I did a podcast recently where we looked at what's in it for everybody, for all the neighbours, etc. But it's very clear that the establishment of Khalistan will bring an enormous raft of benefits. But the establishment itself is going to be really the hardest transition period, because of course any new nation, when it's established, needs an enormous amount of resources, primarily financial resources, to start building those building blocks, the basic infrastructure to have a fully functioning, administratively functioning nation. It needs a central bank. It needs all the basic back office infrastructures to run and manage a whole nation. So, of course, but we do know things are moving behind the scenes. But of course, behind that, it does also, a new nation, really, whether it likes it or not, it does need some form of sponsor behind it. And the sponsors will be queuing up on the international stage. Now, of course, at the front of that list is going to be China. There's absolutely no question. I totally and utterly predict that one of the countries queuing up and offering trillions of dollars to Khalistan will be China, because China is desperate for a route to the Arabian Sea and therefore the Indian Ocean. And currently it's courting Pakistan, because Pakistan offers that route all the way down to that strategic sea access, ocean access. But of course, the establishment of Khalistan offers that very same opportunity. And China is very well known for buying influence, for buying capability. It's done it right across the world, particularly West Africa as a prime example, where it's essentially bought up nations and access to all their natural resources for their own benefit. And that is likely what will happen, is that China will be courting all the key figures in the Khalistan movement, saying, look, we will offer you trillions of dollars to build your nation. We will help you build your nation. But of course, it always comes with a sting in the tail. We do know what that sting in the tail is. But on the other hand, you will have, of course, the Western nations, who I suspect won't be quite as effusively offering so much money, but because I'd say that they won't have that sort of drive, that commercial drive and strategic drive that China, and that aggressiveness that China seems to have, the West seems have lost that sort of same aggressiveness, but sadly, and that's to our detriment. But ultimately, the United States and Europe, particularly the US, I believe, will be the party that will be behind the building of Khalistan, for all the obvious reasons that you've outlined there, James. And I do suspect that any money coming from the US will of course come with a price. There is always conditions attached, but I suspect they won't be quite as draconian as they will come from China, because of course the strategic benefits to the US and actually to the Western democratic world are enormous, because of course China is on Khalistan's doorstep. So but ultimately, Khalistan will be an independent nation. It will need that initial influx. It will need that initial funding, that seed funding, let's call it, from other nations to get it off the ground. But once that happens, it will then become self-sufficient, and it will be governed under a democratic form of rule. But that, of course, will be its own unique Panjpyari, as it's called, its own way of managing its nation, its own model of democracy, which, of course, we saw in the original Sikh Empire, which was so successful back in the 19th century. But of course, Khalistan, as you rightly say, James, it will be the peacemaker. Khalistan will be the nation in surrounded by all these other nations that at the moment, well, we have India and Pakistan at each other's throats since 1947. Nothing will ever change until Khalistan is established. But of course, then we have the future threat, and that, of course, is China. So slap bang in the middle of all these three potential flashpoints, we have Khalistan, the peacemaker. But Khalistan, and to use an English phrase, it will be the iron fist in the velvet glove. On the face of it, Khalistan will be this peaceful, democratic nation where all are welcome, etc. But underneath, it will be backed by the West. It will be backed militarily by the West. It potentially could even be a nuclear-powered nation. It could be an Israel, because, of course, it will have access to allies' technology, allied, of course, being the US and Europe. It will have allies in the UK and France, both, again, nuclear powers. So it is very likely that Khalistan could become a nuclear nation. Now, it might not have its own owned nuclear weapons, but it likely will have it will locate and it will host nuclear weapons from the West, of course, because once again, strategically, the West wants to have a nuclear base in Asia, so it can attack, God forbid, that if it ever goes to war with China, it has actually localized nuclear weapons. It can use tactical nuclear weapons. It doesn't then need intercontinental ballistic missiles. It just has tactical short-range missiles that can just hop over a border, God forbid, into China. But those will be the thought processes, militarily speaking, going through the minds of Western strategists. So yes, it will be the peacemaker. It will be this democratic nation, and then economically, as we said, it will be a success, not only because there will be an enormous influx of FDI, foreign direct investment, because all these Western nations are desperate to get in there and build. It will also have a host population who are inherently genetically driven to be entrepreneurial. There is something deeply instinctive within every Sikh out there who just has a need to build, to create, to grow, and that is that's what originally made the Sikh Empire so successful. And that is why the diaspora, as a generalization, has been so successful in all the nations that the diaspora has ended up in, is because wherever a Sikh lands, that Sikh builds and creates and grows. They are driven entrepreneurially. So, of course, you've got that mindset in Khalistan, and that in itself will grow that Khalistan economy enormously. So, as I say, it will be, I think, economically, it will be an enormous success. And then, of course, we just have the whole diplomatic relations around it. Now, the whole Pakistan issue, which is, again, quite a fascinating subject. And on my podcast tomorrow, we'll probably be focusing on Pakistan specifically and its relationship with China and India, etc. But Pakistan has an interesting situation here because, of course, what's in it for Pakistan? Now, it's likely Pakistan may end up losing a bit of ground, a bit of land to the establishment of Khalistan. But ultimately, it then does separate it from its perennial enemy, India. But Pakistan has been courted massively by China. Now, the advantage, of course, for the West is the establishment of Khalistan in regards to Pakistan is that Pakistan now is increasingly aligning with the West. It's got this new alliance with Saudi Arabia, this sort of mutually assured protective pact with Saudi Arabia, which in turn is an ally of the West. Now, China doesn't like this, so China is trying to extend its Belt and Road through Pakistan, again using Pakistan as its access to the Indian Ocean. But the establishment of Khalistan starts to dilute that whole region and China's influence in that whole region, because China then suddenly has a Pakistan that is not quite as significantly strategic to China, because it's got Khalistan next to it. And Khalistan, of course, will be, no doubt, will be a powerful ally of Pakistan. I think the ties between Pakistan and Khalistan will be particularly strong because, well, certainly as we've revealed recently, is that Pakistan has been a huge friend to the Sikh people in recent times, particularly after the Pahalgam attack, etc., and the Kartarpur corridor, etc. So the links run deep. So of course that alliance will be very strong, and of course that alliance will again be more increasingly allied to the West as opposed to China. So again, you can start to see how the dynamics start to become a little bit more nuanced, but a bit more interesting. And India, in turn, as we often say, is increasingly allied with Russia, China, etc. So again, you can start to see how the dynamics in the region work, James. So yeah, it's a very, very complex subject, James. But ultimately, as we always conclude after all these conversations, Khalistan is a good thing. It brings benefits not just to the region, but actually to the global community. It is the peacemaker. It is that iron fist in a velvet glove. It is the nation once established that will establish peace, hopefully forevermore, in that region, James.
I think so. And I really believe that the benefits, I mean, there's just so much strategic benefit to the West. And I actually think that they are set up a lot better than most nations when it comes to forming a new nation, that is, because of the fact that they have such a widespread diaspora, but also that the diaspora is very well represented in foreign governments. In Canada, for example, in the parliament, in the legislative assemblies across the province, I think that their representation in politics around the world could be a massive benefit to give them influence and to open those trade corridors, Angus.
No question. And talking about trade corridors, of course, it will become self-sufficient very quickly because it is blessed with so many natural resources. As we keep saying, it is the breadbasket of India. And as you rightly said, James, it provides 12% of the rice for India, and was it 17% of its wheat? And this is the most populous nation on earth. So that again, this is any nation would give its right hand to have those sorts of natural resources, and that's not even including its water. And it's blessed with its rivers, its Himalayan sourced rivers. So anyway, right, James, let's move on, and I'm going to talk about a couple of days ago. This was Bandi Chhor Divas. This annual event is a very, very important event in the Sikh calendar. Bandi Chhor Divas literally translates, if my Punjabi is correct, Bandi, it means imprisoned, Chhor means release or liberation, Divas, day. In other words, it is Liberation Day. And this celebrates, it's actually celebrated alongside Diwali, the Hindu festival, the Festival of Light. But the festival of, or the celebration of the honour, is more of an honouring really rather than celebration. It's honouring those who have been imprisoned, and it's celebrating the release of those who's been imprisoned. But it holds a very deep meaning. This whole day holds a very deep meaning for Sikhs, because it symbolises many things, but not least freedom, justice, and of course the Guru's compassion. The Guru particularly was the sixth Guru, Harbind Ji. And the Guru, the story behind it, and I'll show a video in a second which will actually explain for those who might not know all the details about it. It was all about how this Guru, who was originally imprisoned by the Mughals, he demanded release, but he expressed, in that whole story, he expressed all the principles that again have become the fundamental bedrock of the Sikh faith. And let me just show you this video again. Just gives it a nice platform to talk about this.
Diwali, the Festival of Lights. A festival celebrating the victory of good over evil. But what if I told you it's not just about light defeating darkness? It's about breaking the chains of fear and injustice. Every year, millions celebrate Diwali, but few know this story behind it. In the heart of India lies the city of Gwalior, home to a massive fort that stretches across more than 740 acres. During the reign of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, parts of this grand fortress were turned into a prison. Countless political prisoners, men who dared to oppose the empire, were locked away for life. This was an era ruled by authority, where power demanded silence and obedience was the only law. But there was one person who refused to bow, a courageous Guru, the sixth light of Guru Nanak. His name was Guru Har Gobind. Guru Har Gobind stood to defend the right of every person to practice their faith freely, a truth that would shape the soul of an entire continent for centuries to come. And for standing up to this injustice, Guru Har Gobind was imprisoned. For years, the Guru remained confined within those stone walls. But even in chains, his spirit was free. He spoke to the other prisoners of justice, of liberty, of the Creator's divine plan. In time, Emperor Jahangir realized the magnitude of his mistake. He ordered that Guru Har Gobind to be released. But the Guru had one condition. He would not walk out of those doors until the other political prisoners, who were wrongly imprisoned, to be set free as well. When the emperor heard this, he made a decree allowing the Guru to take with him anyone who could hold on to the edge of his robe. So the Guru had a special robe made, one with 52 tassels, each representing a prisoner's hope for freedom. And on that day, as the gates of the fort opened, the Guru walked out with 52 men holding onto his robe. This day is known as Bandi Chhor Divas, literally meaning the day of liberation. If you're celebrating Bandi Chhor Divas, share this video with your friends and family. Let's spread the light of the Guru. From all of us here at the Divisive Sikhi team, we wish you a joyous Diwali and a blessed Bandi Chhor Divas.
So thanks to Basics of Sikhi for that video, a really helpful video actually, and that website, they've been around for I think over 10 years. They've been really a solid source of educational material for the likes of myself and James. So thank you to Basics of Sikhi for that one. But yes, Guru Har Gobind Sahib Ji, the sixth Guru, he actually also established the principle of Miri Piri, this sort of temporal and spiritual combination, and saying they are both together. And sadly, as that video came out, it's sending the message that Sikhs as a whole are obliged by the principles of Sikhi to be political activists, as well as following Gurbani, the holy scriptures. And sadly, and I think the sad resonance of this whole story is, of course, it is equally as relevant today as it was back in the time of the sixth Guru. Because, of course, there are many Sikhs who still reside in prison as political prisoners. So Bandi Chhor Divas is actually a day where the Sikh community come together and remember and exert pressure on the Indian government to pay attention to the Bandi Sikhs, as they're called. These are a group of Sikhs who still remain in prison after many decades of serving sentences. And of course, there are many other examples. We have Amritpal Singh, for example, a political prisoner in Chandigarh jail. We have Jagtar Singh Johal and all his colleagues, and many other Sikhs who are essentially political prisoners in India, who we must not forget. So again, this day is deeply relevant to not just the Sikh community, actually, to the global community, for those who actually have woken up to what India currently represents. So these the Bandi Singhs, or the Bandi Sikhs as it's sometimes called, they are these Sikh prisoners. They were convicted primarily for their involvement in the militant activities during the 1980s and 1990s. Of course, 1984 Operation Blue Star was really that seminal event, followed by the genocide later in the year in October, November, after the assassination of Indira Gandhi. Is that after those events, is that the Sikh people in Punjab, who were so oppressed and so damaged by the Indian state, that they then had to rise up and say, you cannot treat us like this. And hand in glove with that, the Indian state then poured in law enforcement, and they unfolded a decade or more of extrajudicial killings, where they were literally taking a whole generation of young Sikhs out into the countryside and murdering them in cold blood, and they were disappeared. Literally, young Sikhs just disappeared overnight, as we often talk about. So as a result, that the Sikh people had no choice. And of course, being a militant, genetically militant group of people with a hugely deep military heritage and a heritage of pride, They said, no, we're not having this letting this happen, and they didn't take it lying down. And of course, they rose up and fought back in a defensive measure. They fought back against this state oppression. As a result, a lot of militant activities happened. A lot of people sadly died throughout the 1980s and 90s. And of course, they were up against this enormous machine of the Indian state, which of course you cannot beat. They were just not numerous enough or powerful enough or well enough resource to rise up against this oppression from the Indian state. And so the Indian state brutally oppressed this rising up into submission. And as a result of that, many Sikhs not just lost their lives, but many Sikhs were then imprisoned under the Indian questionable judicial system. Now, many of those Bandi Singhs or Bandi Sikhs still remain in prison today. And particularly, and there are a long list of these Bandi Singhs, and primarily the focus is on 20 of them, 2 which are actually currently on parole, but 18 of them have become almost the focal point of the campaigning, and again part of this Bandi Chhor Divas situation. Their names remain on the lips of the Sikh people. And I'm just going to go through a few of these just to give you an idea of who they are. Devinderpal Singh Bulla, he's serving a life sentence after the Delhi bomb blast. And this is where they actually assassinated the former Chief Minister Bandi Singh in Punjab. Bandi Singh was the Chief Minister of Punjab during these terrible extrajudicial killing times of the 80s and 90s. So 2 of them, Bulla and another Singh, Rajwana, were caught, sentenced. In fact, both were sentenced to death, and their sentences were then commuted to life imprisonment. But they still remain in prison all these decades later. And then you can read the list there of others involved in it. Jagtar Singh Hawara, Jagtar Singh Tara, both co-conspirators in Bandi Singh's assassination, etc., etc. Now, and of course, the accusations have been long against the Indian state about this. And look, many of these guys are so old now that they are not even functioning as normal, healthy human beings. In fact, I think Bulla Singh himself is actually now in hospital because I think he's got mental illnesses, etc. So many of these are becoming so old that they should not be in prison. They're not a threat to anybody. They're no threat to society. So even in a simple act of compassion, they should not be held behind bars, and yet they still do. And of course, they are now being accused of being political prisoners, and more and more people in the community and in the wider global community are beginning to wake up to the fact these guys, and I'll wrap up in this group, people like Amritpal Singh, Jagtar Singh Johal, etc., etc., they are political prisoners. And as I said in one of the earlier shows this week, I said, if any nation has but one political prisoner, it cannot claim itself to be a democracy, because you cannot lock up anybody for their political views, particularly if they are peaceful, or as long as they're not inciting violence or they don't break any fundamental democratic law or inciting violence or whatever, then their political views cannot be a reason to lock them up. If they are political dissenters, if they are trying to hold any government to account, democratically speaking, then you cannot lock them up. And therefore, you cannot call yourself a democracy if you have political prisoners. And India, sadly, tragically, is full of political prisoners. And I'll just this is the headline from the Indian Express, where this argument has actually been rolling on for decades now, saying that these people aren't just political prisoners, is that all the local political parties, and the AAP, the Aam Aadmi Party, for example, has been accused of using these political prisoners as political pawns. And the arguments, and again, this article, I don't want to bore you with the details of it, but there have been so many political games played across the Lok Sabha, across Punjabi politics particularly, about these prisoners, is that these prisoners become important to political parties as political tools. In other words, they don't genuinely care about these Bandi Singhs. Their story is brought up only periodically when they need to promote their political party, when they're looking for votes, basically. So in other words, they say, we'll stand up for the Bandi Singhs if you vote for us. And then they're voted in, and then suddenly they're all forgotten about. So they've become political pawns, not just political prisoners, but political pawns in these ridiculous political games amongst these political parties in the Punjab. And just the final footnote to this, James, is just to highlight this two-tier justice that goes on in India. Many of the police that were finally convicted after many, many years, in fact, many decades, some of them, who were finally convicted of these dreadful crimes for extrajudicial murders of young Sikhs in the 80s and 90s. Many of these police who were then sentenced into prison, many of them were given long sentences, but they were released after a few years. Unfortunately, the Bandi Singhs have never enjoyed such commuting of sentences. They never enjoyed such leniency. But of course, the police officers, the law enforcers, those murderers in the Indian state uniform, they were let off after a few years. So again, you can start to see the two-tier justice, sadly, that exists in India. So James, sadly, I think that the whole story of this is very sad. It's very tragic that even now, all these centuries later, is that Bandi Chhor Divas is as relevant today as it was in the time of the sixth Guru. And this really, again, highlights why the Sikh community must never, ever let off the pressure. They must keep pushing for this. But ultimately, the only permanent solution, sadly, for this is once again the establishment of Khalistan, where the rule of democratic law can be established and that these Bandi Singhs can hopefully be released and people can actually live in a free, genuinely democratic society, actually run by the genuine rule of law. And just to go back to your subject, James, about Khalistan, one thing I didn't touch on was, ironically, I think Khalistan will have an immigration problem. Why? Because I suspect a large part of the Indian population will want to migrate to Khalistan when they realise what it is they're missing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't even think it's going to take that long for them to realize what they're missing. I think it's going to be right off the hop that a lot of people are going to want to be, I guess you could call them founding citizens of Khalistan. And that's great. I will take a trip to India. I will wear a robe and I will have millions of tassels for everybody to join on and we'll go together across the border.
Absolutely. Khalistan Zindabad. Now, talking about the Punjab, I'm just going to finish off my stories today with actually, again, a very sad story. And we've often talked about how India has had this very deliberate policy of diluting the politics of the Punjab. Now, we've actually seen since 1947 how the Punjab, well, in the original partition was essentially cut in half. And then what was left in India, Punjab, which at the time had a majority Sikh demographic, is over time, as the Sikhs campaigned for more autonomy, is that the Indian state then in 1966 divided what was left of Punjab once again into a much smaller Punjab and Haryana. And then, as a result, the Punjabs ended up in a tiny section of the old original Punjab, but at least it was then a majority Sikh state. But even since then, there's been this deliberate, deeply insidious policy by the Indian state to dilute that Sikh majority into a minority. They've been they've established these policies to deliberately pour Hindus into Punjab state so that the Sikh voice, the Sikh democratic voice, becomes weaker and weaker. Now, couple that with the divisive political policies of the BJP since 2014, where again, the BJP has maintained its power and its control over India by having these divisive policies, turning Hindus against Sikhs, turning Hindus against Muslims, etc. This deeply extremist nationalist agenda. It's creating an increasing sad outcome of more and more violence on the streets. And a video that's gone viral, I'm going to show you this video, I'll show you a few seconds of this video. This, again, allegedly, and we haven't been able to cross-check this, so we don't know for sure, and there's a lot of Punjabi around it, which I haven't been able to translate. But this video went viral, and again, it does, in any context, this is deeply wrong. But let me play you this and make your own conclusions. No, I don't think we need to show any more of that. But it's deeply disturbing. And this allegedly happened in Punjab. And that is a young Sikh man being attacked by two guys clearly labelled as Hindus. and he's even lost his Dastar. So again, it's just not just deeply violent, but it's deeply offensive to his articles of faith as well. But unfortunately, this once again, James, is indicative and very symptomatic of what is happening in the Punjab. I see right across social media loads of videos, not dissimilar to this, of violence against Sikhs. Is that Hindus are turning on Sikhs? These are people who used to live side by side perfectly amicably, but unfortunately, this divisive agenda, this pouring, this influx of Hindus into Punjab is having the inevitable outcome is that Sikhs are being attacked in the streets like this. This is it's absolutely unforgivable, this.
Absolutely. And I'm just looking at it and I can see all the fading and all of that. Now, there's two things that this could be. It could be green screened. It could be completely manipulated. Or more likely, it's because in certain regions they actually film. This is probably a CCTV or something. So they're not capturing the same frame rate as we do on streaming or on television. And what happens is it almost gives that blur look, and you'll see where in this particular image on the screen now, you can see the legs and the waistline, but then it kind of fades into the wall. And what's happening is that those frame rates are actually being blurred because of the fact that we're playing back on a different speed on the frame rate here in Canada. So for those who don't understand frame rates, basically each second of a video, you have about 32 or 24, depending on the frame rates, still images that when they move quickly, that makes up the video. So essentially what's happening here is that it may only be showing 12 stages of stills, therefore giving the appearance that the person is fading off, but it's because of that. So again, and I think that's most likely what this is here, but I just thought I'd bring that up, Angus.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, James. And yeah, again, it's sadly, this is just the inevitable outcome of the BJP policies unfolding in Punjab. And once again, it always comes back to the same old conclusion. This terrible situation is only ever going to end when Khalistan is established, when the Sikhs actually have their own nation where they can be safe to walk their own streets. So, James, let's move on to our comments section, and a big thank you as always to our wonderful audience for loads of comments that they've been pouring in. And yes, talking about law and order in the Punjab, Suftu Muffin starts us off saying that there is no police complaint authority in the Punjab. This is despite the fact that the Supreme Court ordered India to have a police complaints authority established. Now, apparently, according to Suftu Muffins, it has been established right across India, but not in Punjab. I don't know if this is true. I'll believe you, Suftu Muffins, but it's very likely to be true based on what we know. There's two-tier justice. India gets the rest of India gets one level of justice, and the state gets one level of justice. But if you live in Punjab, God help you, James.
I think that if you go to police stations in Punjab, and the Indian police stations are going to have the complaint office, and it's going to have a sign that says complaints here. You're going to go in and you're going to find yourself in a torture cell.
Exactly. We do know what goes on in Punjabi police stations, sadly.
Exactly, we do, Angus.
And Mohan Danoa says Punjab is currently just being milked by India. It's being exploited by India. India contributes nothing to Punjab. It only takes, including, of course, its water. India, absolutely. I mean, India has exploited the Punjab. It's exploited its agriculture. It's exploited its water, its industry, etc. And what's it done in return? It's investing in pet states like Gujarat, as we often report, but it's not putting very much back into Punjab. And again, often as I reported in many of my podcasts, we talked about how the state of Punjab has been deliberately denuded. It's been sucked of its resources, its industry, its commercial infrastructure, James. Punjab is only a loser as long as it remains part of India.
Absolutely. And I mean, we talked earlier about the 17% on wheat, the 12% they supply to the nation in rice. Do you really believe that they are getting all of the profits and that the farmers are being compensated fairly for that major market share? I think the India government at the federal level is definitely making out better, as well as their corporate cronies. more so than the farmers in Punjab, I believe. And that would transition to a much more lucrative deal for the farmers when Khalistan happens.
And again, if you just do a simple economic analysis, Punjab, in theory, should be one of the richest, wealthiest states of India, and yet it is not. Yeah. Why not? So you have to ask that very simple question. We all know the answer. Amarjit Saini, this is an interesting one. Pakistan Zindabad, Khalistan Zindabad. Of course, we do know we have many viewers in Pakistan, so welcome and a big shout out to our viewers in Pakistan. Spread the word, please do get more people watching us. But Pakistan Zindabad, Khalistan Zindabad. We referred earlier, James, how we believe that Pakistan will be a hugely staunch ally of Khalistan. Of course, we do know that the hands of friendship will stretch across that border, and the Pakistanis have actually been extremely welcoming, let's say, to the Sikhs crossing, of course, to the Kartarpur corridor, etc. So again, we do know, those amicable ties remain strong and will remain strong post Khalistan, James.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's going to be all rainbows and unicorns at first. I think there's going to be a bit of a fluctuation and an adjustment period for both of them to set up their ties and their geopolitical agreements and everything else. But I think that, in the long run, it's going to be a huge benefit for both sides of that relationship.
And thank you, Dot, for your comment here. This is about the story I did about India allegedly backing all sorts of activities, particularly terrorist activities over the border in Pakistan. And but Dot says, look, there are allegations, counter allegations, but no independent evidence has been produced to substantiate these claims. Analysts generally view these accusations as part of the propaganda war between the two nations. Yes, absolutely right. And critics, however, argue that international observers tend to downplay India's extensive military presence in Kashmir, etc., and its regional influence in Balochistan, Afghanistan. Yeah, and I think this really highlights the problem that we have, James, is that, of course, all these activities, whether Pakistan is getting involved in Kashmir and it's, let's say, assisting extremists operate in Kashmir, or vice versa, if RAW is again operating on Pakistani soil through proxy operatives, we'll never know, because these are all intelligence agency games that always, by definition, hide beneath the surface. There never will be substantive proof, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, we know that there is such an overwhelming amount of freedom of the press and invitation of international reporters and journalists. I can't even say that with a straight face, Angus. So let's go to the reality. We don't have any opportunity to get the real information out of India. We know that they suppress the actual media, especially when it comes to the international relations. And it's a he said, she said, and we know that it comes from both sides.
And actually, you can equally apply this argument to the governments of respective countries, because India accused Pakistan of being behind the Pahalgam attacks, by acquiescing to the extremists crossing the border from Pakistan. Again, it's all just accusations. Where was the proof? But even governments are up to this same sort of accusation. So it's not just people like us just trying to report what we hope is the truth. It's the same propaganda will certainly exist between the governments as well. So anyway, thank you for the comment. That's a very, very pertinent comment, that. Abi Aurora says, oh yes, both you and Angus and James and all six know that the permanent solution is, of course, the creation of Khalistan, this buffer zone. But, and here's the key question, how do we convince Donald Trump and leaders of the Five Eyes nations and Western democracies? Can you please think of a means to achieve this objective? Well, that's what we try and do on a daily basis. But what I would say is that a lot of it is driven by grassroots activism and campaigning. The more that Khalistan flags are seen out there, particularly in the Western world, the US, North America, and across Europe, and of course our friends down under, the more Khalistan flags that are seen, the more questions are asked by a broader base of people. Politicians will only act when it's in their best interest. It's a sad fact of politics. So the more pressure that comes from the grassroots electorate, the more likely it is that politicians will say, oh, you know what, I can win those votes by adopting this policy. So again, it's all about grassroots activism. And we say, James, on such a regular basis, it really works. Grassroots lobbying, getting out there in the streets with your Khalistan flags, talking to people, turning up to these demonstrations, these democratic protests, etc., they actually have an impact. You might might not think it is. You might think your single voice is but a single voice. It is not. The more of you that join together, the more powerful it becomes. It's pushing that pressure upwards through the political hierarchy, and it does have an impact. So all I would say to you, Abiy Aurora, is keep getting out there, keep getting the Khalistan flag out there, keep campaigning, talk to more and more people, because the more people that are aware of it, the more that message spreads out, and the more pressure then starts being exerted upwards, James.
Absolutely. And a part of the report that I started tonight that we'll be talking about on Monday involves the strategic contingency planning. And essentially that, believe it or not, there are nations, including the US and Donald Trump's administration, they are always working. They're not encouraging any type of separation, but they are very much involved in having intelligence and foreign policy reports that are really looking at contingency plans. If these certain things were to happen in the world, how do we react and how do we be proactive? And believe me, Khalistan would be definitely one of those scenarios that they're looking at for South Asia.
And don't forget, of course, that many of the Sikh organisations, particularly the Sikh Federation International, are actually adopting strategies now to convince people like Donald Trump. They are going about it the correct way with the United Nations. They are forming these legal entities that can then approach the United Nations and these other bodies to say, here is our legal case. Can you please arbitrate or decide legally on the establishment of Khalistan? So in other words, it's not just grassroots campaigning just to ensure that the global support is there amongst the people, is that the actual necessary legal steps are also being taken. So all I would say to you is keep the faith. It is coming, but just don't let off the pressure. We will get there hopefully sooner rather than later. And the final set of comments. Satbashan Singh starts us off with, "You're both fabulous twins, James. Truth tellers." Well, we do try to tell the truth. Nice to hear it and to see you guys. Well, it's absolutely nice to see and hear from you guys, particularly in our comments column. So do keep those comments coming, James.
Absolutely. And twins, well, I don't know. I think Angus looks much younger, so.
Bless you, James. Thank you for that. I'll come back with when I can think of a suitable compliment. I shall reciprocate. And Hardal Singh says, "Twinkle, twinkle, little stars, James and Angus. We are little stars. How about that?"
That's hilarious.
Flattery gets you everywhere. That's the message to our audiences. Keep flattering us.
I would say, absolutely.
We love it. We often don't get compliments, so thank you. Faye X3 says, "Awesome information and real facts." So much, both of you. Yes, that is what we're about here. It's all about the facts. And Stay Safe even comes up with a lovely compliment. Some very valuable intel and fact file has come on Perspectives episodes again and again. Of course, Surinder Singh's Talking Punjab show. So, of course, if you are a Punjabi speaker, do watch Surinder's shows. They are equally fascinating. Not that I would know, because my Punjab is not quite there yet. But just the way you do it differently, it's authentic and fact-checked. You can't find news like this elsewhere. And you love the direction the channel's taking. Well, thank you for that lovely comment. We do our best, as we say. We often, everything that we talk about, we do try and fact-check and corroborate as much as possible. And where we're not sure, we will always highlight the fact that it has not been corroborated, or we don't know, but here is what is being discussed, etc. So, but thank you for that comment, James.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the final sign-off goes to Sardar Gurmeet Singh, who, again, my Punjabi must be coming on leaps and bounds, because if I'm not incorrect, I think it says something like, "Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, Khalistan Zindabad." I think our Punjabi must be improving, at least by now.
Yours certainly is. Mine, well, it's slow, but it's coming.
So, but on that hilarious note, we must bring Perspectives to close for another day, and indeed another week. Please don't forget to keep your comments coming in. We do appreciate all your comments, and we've had some great ones recently. So do keep the informative, educational, and interesting comments on stories that we might have missed or you wanted us to talk about, because they're always fascinating to research as well. But that is it for another week. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget, you can of course message us directly. Please do email us if there's something you'd like to talk to us directly about, at message@satlugetv.com. But that's it for another week. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next week.